kind of weird. I don't know how to describe this, because, I mean, a lot of people who have either looked into Square Enix's major background, or have, like, been, like, majorly invested with the company and stuff like that, could probably tell you this has happened on more than one occasion. But, to me, this exposure, this outlandish exposure, is kind of, like, insane is what it is. So, it involves Square Enix, and unfortunately, what has happened is all basically downhill from what it sounds. But, I mean, from what we can gather, it's just like this one segment, this one section entirely. But the problem is that the news is kind of like scattered out, so I'm going to talk about what is like 100% confirmed, like 100% confirmed. And then we're going to talk about like what I think might actually happen, as well as talk about what other people think has actually happened. But before I even go into that, let's talk about what was actually supposed to happen. So if you don't know, a couple of months back, they made an announcement that they were going to be releasing the final 4 DLC episodes for Final Fantasy 15. They were Episode Auden, Episode Lunafreya, Episode Aranea, and apparently Episode Noctis. I'll get to that in just a sec, but and that was supposed to be futurely updated to be let people know when it was going to happen, you know, because it was supposed to come out throughout 2019. And according to what Square Enix said, that would be the last DLCs that people would be getting involving Final Fantasy 15. Dating to November 7th, I believe it was, November 7th. Or it was November 8th. Hold on. Yeah, it was November 7th. I had to think for a second, like, wait, when was that? Yeah, it was November 7th. So, anyway, so November 7th, they had a live stream involving Final Fantasy 15. And it was fairly short. And, we had quite a bit of, dramatic news that happened. It's funny, too. It's like, I completely forgot about the live stream that was going to happen. And then I wake up, look on Twitter, and people are losing their absolute minds over this stuff. And the news was so scattered out, you know, it was kind of hard to say what was going on. And the weird thing is that I did, like, one set of recording of this particular topic, and all of a sudden, news started to spread out like wildfire, and I was like, I better hold on a second before I even release that, and then I realized, yeah, I gotta do a new one. So this is my second attempt, for those that don't know. But, so, according to the news, is that, of the DLC that was supposedly supposed to be released throughout 2019, 3 of them have been cancelled. Yes, 3 of the DLCs have been officially cancelled. The only one that managed to survive that's going to be released in 2019 is Auden. So, that makes me happy, if nothing else. To be able to play as him, and then to actually get to see his background story, that was, like, something that I was definitely looking forward to the most, really, in all honesty. I was kind of confused as to, like, how they were going to do Lunafreya. Like, whenever I heard that you were going to have a Lunafreya episode, I was like, okay, how is that going to work? You know, it's like, we haven't seen her fight at all. She's been mostly communing with the gods, and, you know, keep in touch with communications with Noctis and everything. Nothing more than that. So it was like, okay, what's going to happen there? Aranea, I can imagine, would have worked. Aranea would have been something that you could have done with in terms of gameplay-wise. Where it would take place, it's hard to say. Probably before she runs into Prompto, but who's to say on that note. But then there was the other one. I did not know about the episode Noctis one that they were supposedly going to do. Apparently episode Noctis was supposed to be like the final episode frontier of like what would happen if shit, all of a sudden I forgot his name. What the hell did I forget? Ignis, there we go. Why did I forget his name all of a sudden? Anyway, so in episode Ignis, which was the last episode of the 4-part segment of the, sorry, my bad, 3-part segment that they were releasing of the DLC, episode Ignis, apparently, you had a choice, after you beat the game first time, after you beat the DLC first time through, you could go back and actually do a secret, alternative ending. And apparently, according to this alternative ending, Noctis lives. He lives. So it's like, okay, what happened? And that particular episode of Noctis was supposed to explain what happened during that whole segment. Like, it was supposed to be a retelling, per se. And that would have been interesting to know, you know? It's like, so, it's not in the main game, per se, but it was supposed to be like an alternate ending, like a what-if scenario. And it's like, this would have been interesting had it actually happened, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen, per se. Unless Square Enix all of a sudden changed their minds and decided to say, well, you know what, we'll go ahead and release episode Noctis, because since people are so interested in this particular subject, and it's like, you know what, it'd probably be okay, you know? But in terms of, like, of those 4, episode Auden I really wanted to have. Because, like I said, I really wanted to know more about him, you know? It's like, of those 3 episodes, we got to know a little bit more about him each time. We didn't know anything majorly in terms of episode Gladio. But in episode Prompto, we learned a little bit more. In episode Ignis, we learned a lot more. We found out that technically he was the brother, apparently. And it's like, oh, so this was actually sort of like a Family Feud type thing. And it was something that was a lot more interesting to get invested in. I was like, I want to know more about him. I hope they do a little bit more update towards his background story and stuff. And whenever I heard this update that they were going to do that, it's like, okay, good. And then this thing happened, and it's like, well, I mean, at least we still got episode on to look forward to, but what the hell happened? Which I am going to continue now. Sorry if I drifted off of that, but on to the second part of it all. Apparently, Square Enix has basically reported a tremendous loss of $33 million. That is pretty insane. It's not a lot when you consider this is Square Enix, one of the bigger companies of gaming, but that is a lot of money, $33 million. And I'll get to that in just a second, because that leads on to another subject, and this is the biggest one that got everyone off guard, in my personal opinion, I think. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I do apologize if I pronounce it wrong. Keep in mind, I'm American, so therefore my pronunciation is going to be completely off. But anyway, Hajimae Tabata, the director of Final Fantasy XV, it is because of him that we were able to get Final Fantasy XV on the Strait of Narrow, to where it can finally get an actual physical release. You know, finally playable for everyone to see and stuff. And, I think he did pretty good. Admittedly, though, it was released unfinished. We can all agree on that one. But he did what he could from where Tetsuki Nomura started. Hajimae Tabata actually finished it to where it could be playable for the world to actually enjoy. It's had improvements, and because of him and his team, we finally are able to see these improvements, and they're slowly growing towards a better game. Better Final Fantasy game? Probably not, but a better game nonetheless. But Hajimae Tabata has basically dropped down from his position of being director and has moved on to basically leave Square Enix and make his own studio. That was the quoting words of what was stated. So, yeah, this is kind of insane. So not only did 3 of the DLC gets cancelled for Final Fantasy 15, Square Enix basically reports a $33 million loss. And then Hajimae Tabata basically drops down and leaves to make his own company. Make his own gaming studio, rather. And it's like, what just happened? And there's a lot of people that are talking back and forth, and it's like, this is not making any sense. but I'm going to try to put together what I've learned thus far. So, let's talk about the so-called 33 million loss. So, what has happened within the $33 million loss? According to what was stated, it has to involve the connection with the Final Fantasy 15 DLC, the 3-part that was cancelled, which, if that was considered part of the loss, why did you cancel it to begin with? And the other reason was because of the fact of the Luminous production. Now, this is something interesting, because this is actually the first time I've ever heard of this. Now, I knew that Square Enix had other smaller studios under their belt, sort of like how Disney has Touchstone Studios, whenever they wanted to make their more mature content of movies and stuff. But that was back in the day. But, so, Square Enix had their own in-game engine, known as the Luminous engine. It's the same engine that Kingdom Hearts was made under and everything. And basically Square Enix wanted to keep using this engine. And because of it, because multiple games that they've been trying to push forward to, for some reason would not run correctly, instead of like throwing away and just sticking to the Unreal Engine 4, they kept on to the Luminous engine and basically created a separate studio altogether in order to make games using the engine itself. And it's hard to say if it's been successful enough. Sorry, mispronunciation. Get used to it. Unfortunately, we wasn't for sure if there's been any success with it, because according to what has been stated, for some reason the Luminous Studio had been moved. Has not been stated as to like how it's been moved, but it's been moved to a new AAA game. Now, there's a lot of people that are trying to decipher what this means. So here's what I'm going to gather at. Apparently, due to the fact that there were certain projects that they couldn't get up off the ground, due to the fact of the complications of the Luminous engine, they decided to move the people that was in that studio onto other projects in order to help speed up the project for these other AAA titles. Now, that's not to say that they're doing it for like Kingdom Hearts 3 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake. It could be something completely different, you know. Some people have theorized that maybe it's a different title that we have yet to have been announced yet, you know. Who's to say, really? And it's hard to say if Luminous Studio was completely disbanded or if it's still going on, but they just moved people onto these other AAA titles. It hasn't been stated yet. Because whenever someone says that they reported a major loss of $33 million, you suspect that it might have gotten shut down, but as far as we know, it has not gotten shut down. But instead, it has been moved on to different projects. So for the time being right now, that's kind of like up in the air. Like I said, it's becoming going back and forth, and it's like, right now we're unsure of what this detail means, per se. But now, Hajimae Tabata. Let's get on to the subject of Hajimae Tabata now. Apparently, he was actually part of the Luminous production as well. He was actually literally one of, if not the director of the Luminous production campaign. And either he and his team was part of Final Fantasy 15. I don't remember. I want to say that Final Fantasy 15 was still under the Luminous production. I don't remember. I'll have to look into that in a little bit. But I want to say that technically Final Fantasy 15 was being made under the Luminous engine. If I'm not mistaken, because at the time that both Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 was developed, they were still using the Luminous engine. And then the only thing I remember was that Kingdom Hearts 3 was moved completely from where it was made on the Luminous engine to where it was reset and being built on the Unreal Engine 4. So that made me think that, so Final Fantasy 15 was still being made under the Luminous production, which would also be a connection between why it had the 3 games being cancelled and why Square reported the $33 million loss in. But that being said, though, If that's the case, then what happened then? If that was all connected, you know? What happened? Like, what came first and what came last? What toppled over, you know? It's like we got this building block of effects. You know, you have Final Fantasy 15, 3 DLC being canceled. You have the $33 million loss. It can't all come from just those 3 DLCs. It can't be. There's no way. That's too much money to lose just on DLC alone. I mean, I'm not going to argue and say that these DLCs affected the game majorly, but they definitely put time and effort into this. But I can't say for sure if they submitted $33 million worth of development time just for that. It doesn't match up, really. It doesn't. In my personal opinion, it just doesn't seem to match up perfectly. And then, of course, there's the fact that Hajimae Tabata. Was him leaving Square Enix before all this, or was it after all this? Like, did the effect of $33 million loss and the 3 DLC games being cancelled happen after he left, or did it happen before he left? If it happened before he left, he must have got so irritated that he decided to leave the company. But then, if he left after the company, then that whole effect must have came afterwards, after he left the company. Like, it was sort of a landslide. You know, Hajimae Tabata being the director of Final Fantasy 15, he was trying to hold up the game as it is, but apparently it just eventually toppled over. Then again, much like Tetsuki Nomura, he probably had a lot of other projects under him as well, you know. Most directors usually do direct more than just one project at a time, you know, depending on how big or how small, they usually work on multiple projects. And so that makes me wonder, how many projects did he have that made him where he couldn't get to work on the one project he was wanting to work? Because apparently, according to what was stated on one of the few other places, he basically, Hajimae Tabata basically stated that he left the company because he wanted to make his own game. He wanted to make his own game, and the only way he could see that through is if he left the studio he worked for so long and developed his own studio. What I don't get is this, is that if you have a game ideal that you wanted to do, why didn't you bring it up to Square Enix to begin with? Now, I admit that I am not the most well-informed when it comes to marketing, much less when it comes to business decisions. But since he is a director of a game company, you would think that he would have the ability to say, hey, I have a game ideal that I want to make, here's my ideal, and here's all the stuff that I want, that I've got built up so far. You know, a concept ideal, you know, something, basically a backbone of what would be the future game that he would be working on. And of course, Square Enix, head corporation, the bosses themselves, would look at this and go, this could work, you know, and stuff like that. But depending on how the decision might have been made, depending on, like, how everything went, could have been, like, where everything could have went to, you know. Again, we're not sure as to what all went wrong. And Hajimae Tabata is not the first one who has ever done this, you know. There's been a couple of directors that we've had, a couple over the years, that has left their formal companies in order to form their own studios, you know. You have, the guy who created Mega Man to develop Mighty No. 9. Same thing with the creator of the Castlevania Symphony of the Night. He left the company in order to make his own game, being that Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. By the way, for those that don't know, the guy who made Mega Man left Capcom, and the guy who did the Castlevania Symphony of the Night was with Kojima Konami. My bad. Ooh, I'm about to mess that up real badly. But then there's also Kojima Productions, which that one was really messy. That I can't really recall what all happened during that point, but yeah, that was an ugly mess right there. But Kojima is actually in charge of his own studio thanks to Sony, where he's making that weird walking simulator game. I I can't even remember the name now. It was so weird, and now is like it's built up to this. But well, that's something completely entirely different. But yeah, Hajimae Tabata is not the first director to do this, but at the same time, I'm worried about Hajime entirely. I'm hoping that he gets a good start, you know. I'm hoping that he actually at least knows what it's going to take just to get to where he wants to be at, you know. And keep in mind, you know, developing your own game is one thing entirely, and it's just, from what we've seen so far, all of these other directors have something in common, is that they've had a long-going start of just making the one game they've been wanting to make, you know. And they've had, like, problems sometimes. There have been some development issues. There have been, like, complications with the engine and stuff. It's just, they've had a rough time trying to develop one game. And it's taken them, like, a handful of years just to finally get it released finally. And out of these games, one of them has been officially released, and sadly, it has not been well received, sadly. I'm hoping that Bloodstained Ritual Night is better than Mighty Number 9. And who's to say about the other game that Kojima's working on? I'm just hoping that Tabata actually knows what he's fixing to get himself into, and I'm hoping that he's well-paced about how he's going to go about it, you know, because it's going to be rough for him, what it will be. It will be rough for a good long while. And Hajimae Tabata, I hope that you get to develop the game that you wanted to develop, and I'm looking forward to it. I just hope that you be careful, because a lot of people have trouble getting to that point, and, well, who's to say what's going to happen now? But the biggest question that I think we're going to be asking ourselves is, what does this mean for Final Fantasy 15? Well, other than the occasional updates that we're probably going to get up until March or April, depending on when the final DLC is going to be released. Which, if I'm not mistaken, episode Arden is going to be released in March of 2019. Let me look at that real quickly just to make certain that I'm not just grabbing out of nothing, because I feel like it should be somewhere through here. Yeah, it is being released March of 2019. And depending on what they do between here and now, or what they decided, I think March is going to be the last month that Final Fantasy 15 is going to have any form of updates entirely. Now that could change, you know. Who's to say really if Square Enix is going to hang on to that, or if it's going to change entirely? Who knows? Maybe they might come out of the blue and give out a bigger update in terms of, like, game expansion. Maybe there'll be a different DLC entirely involving Noctis or whatever. Who's to say right now? Because there's, like, 4 or 5 months before that comes out. So it will be a long while. It's going to be a long wait before then. But anyway, though, guys, let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts about all this? You know, what have you found out so far in regards to this whole situation? Because this is still kind of out in the blue right now. We're still trying to kind of piece it all together. We're not given, like, where did the $33 million loss come from? Specifically, rather. It can't all just come from the DLC, but for some reason they're stating that some people are stating that it is, but there's no way that's possible. I'm pretty sure if there was an amount, it would have to be at least, like, and this is just grabbing out of the air, but it has to be, like, within, like, 2 to 3 million per DLC, if that's the case. I mean, I understand for, like, one major game, but just for DLC, there is no way that $33 million could have come from all that. It can't have. It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, though, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until then, I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.